mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
What's up, world? Welcome again to our Mix What I Like Live right here at Black Power Media. Again, I'm Jared Ball. Very happy to be hosting. Happy to be back on. Hope you all had a good weekend. Very happy to be holding it down for the remix crew, which will be back in effect in full tomorrow morning. Please take this opportunity to hit the like button and reach out to invite others to join us, because as I think some of you see, we just got confirmation that Dr. James will join us next hour. And so the beautiful thing is, I went from being worried about not having enough to do, to having more than enough very quickly, and that's a beautiful thing. So I'm very excited that Dr. James will join us to talk to us about what I was hoping to talk about anyway, but since she's going to be here, it just got that much better. So please do reach out and let folks know to jump on in. Hit the like button. I do like how other hosts come and say, like the feed coming in, get the shoes off, I hit that like button. Please do continue to join and subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss notifications about all the increasing content that's coming and that is here that I start to get caught up on. I missed Sundays last week because we were on the road a little bit, and that there is actually something I want to share about that. I can't get out of my head. Before we do that, I definitely want to once again please invite yourself again and others to join you in supporting Sister Katea Stitt, who is still endeavoring to reach a goal here of making the chat again. And please consider my mic is low. Low. Test 1, 2. It is low. Did that help at all? I don't think so.
Test 1, 2. Test 1, 2. I think that's better though, isn't it? Is it still low? Still? It's reading extremely high. Fixed. Okay, thank you. All right, right on. Right on. Apologies, everybody. Not sure what that is or why that is. But yeah, test. Yep. Should be working pretty well. All right, very good. Yes. All right. Well, anyway, then let me just say again, let me just greet you all again. Thank you all very much for joining us. Very excited that Dr. James will be joining us. and very happy to be back with you, holding it down till the remix morning show starts. Heard nothing you said. um uh Welcome to I Mix What I Like Live here at Black Power Media. I'm Jared Ball. Very happy to be back. Very happy that you're with us. Please do hit the like button, the share button, tweet out or Facebook out or whatever out to folks to let them know to jump on in, so that they definitely don't miss Dr. James, and even a little bit about what I'm going to do before then. I think there's some interesting stuff. And then please do check the link in the chat, support Katea Stitt, who is the program director at WPFW. And again, just one of the many unheralded enough, at least, people who do all the great work that don't get enough credit. So, Obioma, thank you. And thank you for doing that. And I'm very sorry it took so long for me to catch that. Sound is muffled. Oh my goodness. I missed a lot. All right. All right. This is what you mean, my mic, the mic being low is my fundraising strategy. Anyway, good. What's up, Netfa? Again, sorry everybody. I'm not really sure what was the cause for that issue, but okay. All right. Well, then let's get to it, because as I said, for a minute I had not enough, and then Dr. James says she's able to show up, and I'm over prepared, so that's a good thing. And man, she's so dope. I just can't. I'm very excited. So listen. So before I get to these somebody, I want to enlist the help of the remixers in doing something. I've been thinking about this for 2 nights now and can't come up with anything. There's something good to be done with this. But I'm walking down the street in Manhattan, not far from Times Square, the other night, and of course everybody's out. There's listen, everybody, I either hope anyway, big shout out. I hope everybody, honestly, I do hope everybody gets vaccinated, and I hope everybody stays safe. There was a lot of not safe happening. And I haven't been out like that in a minute, so there's a lot of not safe happening. But I'm walking down the street, and there's this older brother who's doing his street performance art. And I honestly missed what he was doing, because as I was walking by, what I caught was what I haven't seen enough of in a long time: in person, not online, offline trolling. And I'm walking by, and this older brother's performing, and these 2 younger cats are coming by, and they see him and they're hating. And they say to him, money, do some new shit. Do some new shit. And the older brother turns around and he says, you got new money? I thought that was just brilliant. I thought it was perfect. And for 2 nights now, I've been thinking there's something political to be done with that. You want new shit, you need new money. I don't know. I can't come up with exactly what I want to do with it. So somebody, I'll leave it up to you to do. Hey, as I forgot whose the lyric it is, but as someone once said, I have scuffed my Timbs on the streets of many rough hoods and cities. Anyway, big shout out to you all. Got to see me the other day, my man Dr. Joaquin Morante. Shout out to my man Dr. Saswat Padianak, and their families. We got to see them this weekend. And I said to my man on Instagram, because I posted this picture with me in Sasquatch, and I was like, India in the building or whatever, because that's where he's from. And somebody took that opportunity to drop their whole anti-coalition politics on my comments. And I was like, man, I erased that joint. I was like, man, get out of here. I sent him a little note, like, just that's not where we have these discussions when I'm, on my Instagram posting my comrades' pictures. Dude has looked out. Dude is brilliant. We go way back to when we were in PhD classes together, and one of the first conversations we had was around his, what's the word? Amazement at the lack of intellectualism in our classrooms. And I was saying the same thing. I had just come from Dr. James Turner's Africana Studies and Research Center, where we put in that work, had those battles, and then we get to the PhD joint in journalism and media studies, and it was like, we was hating from the jump. Anyway, shout out to them. Shout out to one day we got to work this out. I have to have. We got into. It was so beautiful to see, like, my daughters were there, Dr. Morante and his beautiful wife and children were there, and then his parents showed up. I hadn't seen them in years, and one's from the Dominican, one's from Puerto Rico, and so what that is. And then we have this wonderful conversation about the heights, and it turns out that Joaquin's father from back in the day used to work with Lin-Manuel Miranda's father. And I have to, I should have done it then. I was too in the moment. I didn't think about it, but I'm going to get permission first before I share with you what he said about that experience. And then he came down here and worked in Mayor Marion Barry's administration in DC for a few years. So I want to see if I can get him to come on and do a whole interview. Joaquin is dope, but his father has some stories that I think would be perfect for I Mix What I Like. All right. I don't mean to make this quick shift, but I am rushing now a little bit. But all due respect and shout out and love to those in Haiti. Obviously that earthquake hit, and then I saw my man Kamal had a great tweet that blew up. I've never had a tweet get thousands, like he got, I don't know, thousands of whatever. But his statement was simply, or essentially, don't run this nonsense about Haiti being cursed. This is not a curse. This is an imperialism designed, or imperialism by design, consequences. That to whatever extent there are naturally occurring incidents with weather or shifts in the earth, they are wildly exacerbated by the oppressive conditions imposed on those people who are being punished for being among, part of the vanguard of anti-slavery, anti-imperial, African-led rebellion revolutions that have and continue to inspire millions. So shout out to Kamal for getting that right, of course, and best all well wishes to the people in Haiti. Anyway, so if you all, which I'm sure you all do, were watching the Remix Morning Show the other day, that's it. Leave dogs, you got it right. Yeah, I thought so, but I'm not. Honestly, I don't know. Chris, I'm not trying to speak on that. And there is a little bit of egg not on this broadcast, but on my other tab here. But anyway, which is yeah, always 6 degrees from the famous. But yeah, but Joaquin's people, they have a long history in the Bronx and in politics and in radical movements. I mean, uh, um, uh, oh man, I mean, honestly, there was so I didn't even there's so much I still have to learn. Like for instance, um, El Comite, I believe, is the name of the radical Latino organization that was parallel uh, to the Young Lords, or ran at the same time as the Young Lords. And we were talking about that. I didn't know anything about that. Anyway, Brother Morante, Mr. Morante needs to, anyway, we got to try to get him in there. Anyway, see if we can get him in here and see and talk about some of this stuff. But anyway, if you were tuned into the remix the other day, it came up with Kim Brown. And so when I saw this, shout out to Dr. Todd Burrows, who on the low was producing the show today. But this opinion piece just came out over the weekend, I believe, in the Washington Post. Goodbye Chocolate City. August 14th. For more than 50 years, Washington, D.C. was Chocolate City, the nation's first major majority Black city, a center for Black arts and culture, and a hub of Black political power. But that title has officially been erased. New 2020 census data reveals. The latest figures show that D.C. residents who identify as white, alone, or in combination, that's deep, now outnumber those who identify at least partly as Black. That's deep. The phrasing in that is deep. I have not seen the data on that. Anyway, I'd like to see what that really means. While every other ethnic group increased in number between 2010 and 2020, the Black population actually fell by almost 10,000. This is obviously a story about gentrification and the structural economic disadvantages that left many Black families unable to compete with whiter and more affluent newcomers for a limited supply of housing in the urban core. But the numbers also tell a more complicated story, one that might have had happier ending if we had made different policy choices. Now, DC became a majority Black in 1957, part of a larger national phenomenon that Alan Ehrenholt has dubbed the Great Inversion. Historically, Ehrenholt notes that the affluent tended to live in urban cores where everything was conveniently close, pushing the less affluent workers to urban fringe. But American cities abruptly reversed that pattern mid-century. This white flight was partly driven by court-ordered desegregation of housing and schools, but there were other non-racist reasons that people left for the suburbs. Yeah, right. First was a decades-long crime wave. People also liked single-family homes with yards, and cars made it possible to have one while working in the city. White people who didn't face labor market discrimination or the legacy of slavery got there first, but plenty of Black people wanted houses with yards and disliked crime too. As the Civil Rights Act increased economic opportunity, DC's Black population peaked in 1970 at 537,712, then began declining decades before any significant increase in the city's white population. Nearby Prince George's County became the wealthiest Black majority county in the nation. But we've already debunked all of that. All right, so I'm not gonna continue on with go check our with Jonathan Hutto in particular, but we've already gone through about and even go back to our discussion on the Black Economic Report that came out from the NCRC, Muhammad and others, myself included, that talked about that talks in detail about where Black money is, to what extent there, and he exists where it is, why it's where it is, and ultimately how little of it exists relative to whites or other groups or to political power in particular would be my ultimate argument. But anyway, but really, I just wanted to highlight this point that officially those who identify as at least partly Black are no longer a majority in Washington, D.C., per our discussion with Kim Brown last week on the Remix Morning Show. So goodbye, Chocolate City. Jesse Jackson hating on Obama while going to San yeah. Oh, what we were debunking was, I'm sorry, more specifically, we were debunking the idea that this idea that PG County being the largest or richest Black population, first of all, meant anything. And then we were trying to explain ultimately that it meant nothing regarding political power, stopping police violence, real wealth, and for a number of different reasons. But so when people say that, when you read opinion pieces like this that I was just reading, or you hear people say that, it presents an inflated. In fact, this is a perfect segue, unplanned at that. It inflates the idea that Black people are doing well. When and so for myself and others who are familiar with this area of a certain politic will note the richest Black population in the country, and some have even argued in the world, is powerless, owns almost nothing, and is still largely dependent on and has that wealth or relative wealth tied inextricably to federal government jobs associated with the Washington, D.C. area. So again, this idea that private capitalism or entrepreneurialism is a potential outlet for Black communities here or anywhere else is fantasy. But often, again, people will say, well, look at the Black community in PG County and say, well, clearly something is working because they're the richest Black community. So that was sort of the mythology we were trying to address. But as a perfect segue, one of the pieces I wanted to get to today, there's actually several that are very much linked. And there is, forgive me again here. Let me just let this browser work itself out. Oh, wait a second. I did want to real quick. Did you all see this? I did mention vaccines. People. I got to shout out. I wouldn't recommend doing this, but I'll shout out Status Quo for doing it. Did you all see any of this? People getting stabbed at this anti-vaxxer rally in LA? There is some hostility and violence if you need to so I'm I was struck by the...
Do you have any concern at all that it's a public health crisis and that your decisions affect other people? We're all in this together. There are a lot of breakthrough cases. The vaccine is not that effective. This is also not scientifically not proven. This is not...
I know LA is its own thing, but I was struck by the diversity, so to speak, of the Antifa folks that you're going to see in a minute. And they really want to fight these Antifa folks, or who they're
Please
calling
down the street.
Antifa.
Thank you so much. Got the shot?
I'm just saying, I know this doesn't
some arguments between both.
This doesn't necessarily relate to all of us,
and it's some type of.
But we gotta be able to have a conversation about vaccines that doesn't degenerate to
Where were they
this.
subbed?
I do not know.
There's clearly a bigger politics being displayed here, but you know. And then I was like, what would I was thinking, like, what would Baba Balagoon be suggesting here?
Hey, bitch. No fucking.
And then they start getting jumped. See, my thing is,
Hey, yo, stop it!
Unmask them! Unmask
yeah, they
them!
do. They go everywhere.
Unmask them! Fuck Antifa! Fuck Unmask them! Unmask them! Unmask them! Unmask them!
Look at that. Look at that. They had weapons.
Unmask them all! Unmask them!
So my thing is, I hope folks are prepared when they go, if they're going to do this. But somebody gets cracked in the head with a helmet, with his own helmet.
Unmask them all! Fuck Antifa! Fuck Antifa!
Yeah, I don't see. I don't even see police out there, other than the one that was getting interviewed.
Unmask them all!
And I don't know when I don't know if that was consecutive. I don't know if the timing of all of it.
Where's Chad Loader? Bring his ass! Bring his ass! Come on! Chad Loader is a pussy! Pussy!
That's wild. And dude is screaming, unmask them, while all his people got masks on.
You're in my face!
Stop it!
You're in my face!
You got Chicanos out there. Yeah, that's wild right there, folks. I hope we should have a Balagoon training session. I was like, how the first thought I had was what all the masters say is situational awareness and don't get caught in that spot. That was unsafe. The numbers weren't right there, and people were getting jumped, hit in the head with their own helmets. Anyway, so I messed up my own perfect segue from the Chocolate City article, but thanks to Dr. Todd Stephen Burrows, who again has been kind of without knowing it, producing the show on the low here. He sent me a couple of stories that actually all connect perfectly. So part of what I was trying to argue with the whole PG County piece, well, part of my whole broader argument is that, again, it's political power and control over policy that is the real key. It's not economic power as it's described. There is a political economy. There is an interrelationship. There is anyway. But the idea that money alone solves the issue, and that there's no pathway or that there is a pathway around assuming political power is part of what I'm arguing has been a long curated and propagated myth to keep us constantly distracted. So that's why you could have a situation where the richest Black population in the country, has no political power, doesn't have much ownership, doesn't have much business ownership in that, even in that community, doesn't in any radical or meaningful way even have the ability to protect itself from the police or other ravages of capitalist and white supremacist colonial inequality. So part of what I've been trying to argue is that, and a core component to my own argument around buying power, for instance, is that the Richard Nixon administration played a very key and particular role in explicitly working to redefine the phrase Black Power away from Kwame Ture and into Cory Booker. Explicitly saying we want Black politicians, mainstream politicians, Black economic or business development, entrepreneurialism, or Black capitalism, specifically, as he said, to be the redefinition. So when people think Black power, when young Black people think Black power, they don't think Kwame Ture, they think Cory Booker, or they think some other Black entrepreneurial aspirant. I don't know. That becomes the goal. So when Dr. Burroughs sent me this story that came out, I believe yesterday. I knowing that I've been, increasingly complaining about the similar process behind buying power being applied to cryptocurrency. This piece came out yesterday. The rise of cryptocurrencies can be traced to Nixon abandoning gold in 1971. And we'll come back to it maybe, in more detail another time. There were, but the piece is just basic. Well, it just starts here. Few dates in economic history classify as turning points, but one of them was 15th of August, 1971, when Richard Nixon went on TV to announce that the U.S. would no longer exchange dollars held by foreign governments for gold. And essentially, the author says here, Nixon's announcement 50 years ago this week had lasting ramifications. It was a statement to the world that the U.S. was too weak to continue anchoring the global monetary system as it had done for the past quarter of a century. It would remain the world's biggest and most important economy, but the days when it was uniquely dominant were at an end. Shockwaves from Washington's decision to break the link with gold have rippled down the decades. The creation of the euro, the hollowing out of U.S. manufacturing, the arrival of cryptocurrencies, and the ability of central banks to print seemingly unlimited quantities of money can all be traced back to August 1971. It goes into to explain in its argument why the geopolitical situation and economic situation required or left, as it says here, Nixon with little choice. I won't claim to understand or agree with all of its assessment, but essentially it's saying here, I think summarized here by Milton Friedman, who is, again, for anyone unfamiliar or underfamiliar, the Chicago University economist, who is credited largely with creating, if not, or redefining that whole school of economics there, but the whole neoliberal or I think neo-colonial argument that basically said governments should privatize everything as much as possible, do as little as possible, other than basically provide the safe structure in which capitalists can exploit everyone, and that idea should be exported as widely as possible throughout, of course, Central and South America, and far as wide. But as he wrote the famous book Capitalism and freedom, arguing that capitalism is freedom. It was, in fact, that book and that argument around Milton Friedman led to a classic, for me, argument with a now deceased, legend professor at the School of Journalism at the University of Maryland. And Dr. Padianak was in the room for that exchange. And we had a nice joke about it after the class. Essentially, that professor really just didn't know what he was talking about. And thought I didn't, and we got into it, and it was demonstrated. I mean, we had some class. It was great. I used to love sitting in that class and just wait to just bust this dude up intellectually every week, and he just hated it. But there's nothing you could do about it. But if you're that wrong, I can't help it. You're asking me to do the reading, and if you're wrong, I mean, it's just gonna come out anyway. But Milton Friedman, anyway, as it says here, Milton Friedman and other monetarist economists were delighted. They said the end of fixed exchange rates would usher in greater stability and low inflation because the value of currencies would be decided by the financial markets, introducing discipline that would keep governments honest. Things didn't quite work out that way, duh. Without the dollar as the linchpin of the international system, the inflationary pressure that had been building on the late 1960s intensified. Oil trades in dollars. So one consequence of the devaluation of the U.S. currency was that countries producing crude were receiving less for each barrel they pumped. Unsurprisingly, they raised their prices. Little more than 2 years after Nixon's gold announcement, the global economy was hit with a fourfold increase in the price of oil. So it goes, in some ways, it goes right back to what I argued about buying power, that George Jackson, a nice segue to where we're going in the next hour, was the only luminary I found to be actually right on the specific issue of buying or purchasing power. And he said in the comment, I quote, more or less paraphrasing it now, that they tell you that your buying power has increased, and then they raise the price of whatever it is you're going to buy, therefore wiping out whatever power is supposed to come in that. And here, and this is it right here. But essentially what this piece is arguing is that once you take the dollar off the gold standard and the dollar is no longer attached in its value to something tangible, you make room for something to become, as the piece I believe concludes, but that the cryptocurrency is the logical extension. Classical economic theory would suggest that an increase in the money supply of this magnitude should lead to a sharp rise in inflation, but that has not happened, at least not yet. Before they became the ultimate speculative play for financial investors, the rationale for cryptocurrency such as Bitcoin was that they represented a hedge against the profligacy of central banks. That wasn't the line I was looking for. But that doesn't make, but anyway, Tricky Dicky didn't know it in 1971, but 50 years later on his decision has led to a world of volatile financial markets, geopolitical tension, inflated asset prices underwritten by low interest rates and quantitative easing, and where trust in central banks is starting to wear a bit thin. In the circumstances, it is perhaps easy to understand why governments have decided to hold on to their remaining gold stocks. All right, but that wasn't. Anyway, there's a line in here somewhere that was basically saying that cryptocurrency is the logical conclusion of a system that is divorced from any tangible relationship in terms of the value of money being connected to something like gold, and allows for it to get to the full virtual currency concept of the currency and the virtualizing of sorts of its value, which is why cryptocurrency changes in value wildly almost on a daily basis. But again, it goes back. So one of the connections I'm trying to draw here is that the mythology of buying power, promoted by Richard Nixon's administration explicitly to walk Black America away from radical political organizing and the attempt to assume political power, which is our only real hope, is that argument, or that propagandized goal is playing out 50 years later in another way, writ large and globally, as Nixon's decision to divorce the value of the US dollar from the tangibility of gold has allowed for a global mythology, has allowed for, in Milton Friedman's wildest fantasies, a handful of private equity groups and venture capitalists to create this concept of a virtual currency, which allows them to go in an unregulated, theoretically not anonymous or unsurveilled way, which is not what's happening, uh, uh, to make for themselves billions of dollars while while offering poor people, and in our case black people, a specific mythological line of saving or safety, lifeline. So as that article is saying, even unwittingly, his in his lifetime conscious goal of propagandizing us away from political power is playing out now writ large 50 years after another policy he created that would help again make room for more fantasy and speculation and power for private capitalists, private equity and capitalists to work largely in anonymity to circumvent democracy or democratically elected governments or other public policy. That's how a handful of hedge fund type people are having this inordinate influence on the entire globe, from the quantity and quality of food and water we get to the quantity and quality of healthcare and so on. So so when I saw, again, I mentioned it the other day, but it's just I'm because I have buying power still set as a Google alert. I just keep getting them over. I mean, there's just currently, and I'm just going to share one example. There's currently a wave of national journalism being generated around the new report from the Selig Center on the multicultural economy. And as I joked about the other day, when I bought the last report in 2019 to have the primary source document for my buying power book, it was $125. It now costs $250. But it's producing nothing more than the same exact mythology. So this story actually says the buying power estimates and differences in spending by race and or ethnicity suggest that as the nation's consumer market becomes more diverse, advertising, products, and media must be tailored to each market segment, end quote. Jeff Humphreys, director of the Selig Center and author of the Multicultural Economy Report, said. So again, if you read it carefully, Jeff Humphreys, who has been authoring these reports for 30 plus years now, is honest in explaining that this is not an assessment of the strength of Black or any other community's economic condition. It is, as the Selig Center, and I lay all this out, continue to lay all this out, as the Selig Center says, they are here to help Georgia's businesses target their ad revenue. That's their explicit mission statement. And as he said in the quote I just read, first of all, listen again carefully, the buying power estimates. And again, I detail why they use estimates and projections and why they are not offering it's in some ways, again, another another connected piece here, because Nixon's divorcing the dollar's value from gold is just like what happens here, where the Selig Center's studies based not on actual economic data and not on any model that is observable, even when you spend the money and read through all of their methodology. When they divorce it from actual economic data, they're able to create fantasy numbers. They're able to speculate economically and come up with these estimates and projections that get turned in through, again, bad journalism and their own, I think, failure to really aggressively clarify this, because I'm sure that there's an economic incentive here. But it gets turned into or redefined as an economic power or strength that Black people and others do not have, that does not exist. So again, the quote, and I'm reading from my notes, but let me see if I could just, here it is right here. The buying power estimates and differences in spending by race and or ethnicity suggest that as the nation's consumer market becomes more diverse, advertising products and media must be tailored to each market segment. So what he's saying is, I'm not trying to say that they're rich and powerful economically. I'm saying you all need to learn, you advertisers need to use this data to target your ad spending and your commercial development more specifically. If you want, if the data says such and such group spends such and such on such and such, you need to have that group in your ad material, or you need to send ads, place ads in media that target there. And that's more specifically what the purpose is. Put ads in the media that target those communities. So if you are a privately owned, commercially driven media outlet, like even those that are nominally a Black news channel, but is owned by a very non-Black billionaire and takes commercial advertising, if you do that, you're going to want to support reporting like this that suggests that Black people and others have this kind of revenue to spend, because you want to project to ad buyers that your audience can and happily will spend its enormous revenue on your product. So there's a disincentive to have a discussion about how these reports mislead and confound and are part of an intentional, overtly expressed program to propagandize Black people away from political organization and the attempt to assume political power, and redirect all of that energy into Black entrepreneurialism. Anyway, it's crazy. And of course, I mean, because the people who are paying for these reports are not meant to be you or me. They're meant to be people who have that $250 as part of their ad revenue budget to learn how to target their ads. That's who it's for. But that's why, at least in 2019, I don't even know if I could do it at 250. I bit the bullet, or whatever they say, and I did it for that, and if I'm going to write a book about it, I gotta at least get to the latest source. But But and then you read it, and it's just it's disrespectful, honestly, in their in the way they try to put this thing together and explain themselves. I was like, man, you can't be serious. But it's just bad. It's bad reporting that continues to support it, and then it's understandably bad reporting when you start to, as I outline, you see the connection between these Black commercial outlets who work with Nielsen and and indirectly with the Selig Center through the promotion of their products to promote this idea to Black audiences that there is this economic power, and if we did better with it, and if we supported our Black businesses, we would collectively do well. But that's not what buying power is. It is not again, it is not a description of economic strength. It is not an assessment of economic condition. It is simply a phrase developed by the ad and marketing community for the ad and marketing community. It is just inexcusably redefined as something it isn't, often through Black and brown and increasingly brown presses and outlets to their communities to convince people, don't worry about politics, don't worry about that public policy. And one reason why they do that is connected to another piece I wanted to quickly get to from the good folks at Wall Street on Parade. Because while we're being told to set up a small business and support a Black this and Black that, and to get on some cryptocurrency, it's folks like Janet Yellen managing public policy that are managing public policy for themselves. So as it says here, after taking millions in speaking fees from Wall Street, Treasury Secretary Yellen redacted 73 meetings or phone calls in the first 3 months in office. Now, why would that be? Well, after stepping down as Fed chair on February 3rd, 2018, Janet Yellen began a whirlwind of speaking engagements that netted her millions of dollars over the next 2 years. But when it came time to disclose those fees after she was nominated by President Biden to become Treasury Secretary, Yellen disclosed only the fees she had made in 2019 and 2020, not the millions she had made in fees in 2018. What Yellen did disclose showed more than $7 million in speaking fees, with the bulk of that coming from Wall Street banks, trading houses, and hedge funds. This is the push 'em left administration. As the news broke this past January about Yellen's cash haul, senior reporter Jesse Eisinger of ProPublica tweeted this, quote, deeply troubling two-fisted money grab from banks by Janet Yellen. This is corruption, but isn't called that because it's so quotidian. End quote. Eisinger added, sure, Yellen might think she can make independent decisions once in office, but how arrogant is it to imagine that money corrupts everyone but you? Yellen brought this distrust on herself. Now the American people have a right to echo Jesse Eisinger and ask, how arrogant is it for Janet Yellen to think she can black out phone calls and meetings on her daily appointment calendar as U.S. Treasury Secretary and not fall under suspicion? Yellen's daily appointment calendar shows that in her first 3 months in office, she has blacked out or redacted 73 phone calls or meetings. There must be something particularly embarrassing about the people involved in at least some of these redacted meetings and phone calls, because there are unredacted names on her appointment calendar that certainly raise eyebrows. On January 28th, Yellen had a 30-minute phone call with former President Bill Clinton. The Treasury Department is the parent agency of the Internal Revenue Service. Bill Clinton's foundation has had tax questions swirling around it for years. How interesting. On February 11th, Yellen had a 15-minute phone call with billionaires Bill and Melinda Gates. Bill Gates is one of the largest family office hedge funds in the world, Cascade Investment, LLC. But as we reported in May, Cascade stopped filing its 13F listing of stocks in its portfolio with the Securities and Exchange Commission in 2008, despite Cascade holding tens of billions of dollars in securities. That's pretty interesting. I'd like to really follow up on that one. That's deep. I have actually never personally looked into Cascade Investment, and if they're holding that many in securities, and that's what's being connected to the next previous and next crash. Okay, that's interesting. I'd like to learn more about that. Anyway, on March 2nd, Yellen had a 15-minute phone call with James Gorman, the CEO of Morgan Stanley. Morgan Stanley is one of the Wall Street firms that paid Yellen an undisclosed amount for a speaking engagement in 2018. On March 11th, Yellen had a 15-minute phone call with Larry Fink, CEO of BlackRock, the giant asset manager. BlackRock was retained on March 24th, 2020 in a no-bid contract to manage the $750 billion corporate bond buying programs as part of the Fed's emergency bailouts of Wall Street. The Treasury, using taxpayer money under the CARES Act, guaranteed $75 billion of this program. BlackRock was allowed to buy up its own exchange-traded funds under one part of this program. Wow. Okay. I mean, essentially, all of what is even in the unredacted portion of this ledger shows the at some of the highest levels the point I'm trying to make about political power. The biggest banks in the world spend millions and involve themselves in public and private meetings constantly with every level of government all the time, specifically because they realize that it's not setting up a small business and supporting one another that creates wealth. It is controlling the political apparatus. Yes, BlackRock is making money off of this, but BlackRock is also making sure it is protected politically in being able to exist, much less, so again, while they're telling us to operate in one way, they are fully engaged in operating the political apparatus. On March 28th, Yellen had a 30-minute phone call with Henry Hank Paulson, former chairman and CEO of Goldman Sachs, who had worked at Goldman for 3 decades before he became Treasury Secretary under President George W. Bush. Paulson sat at the helm of Goldman Sachs when a large portion of its toxic collateralized debt obligations, CDOs, were sold to unsuspecting investors. Paulson helped to structure the Wall Street bailout in 2008, with his former firm being a major beneficiary. Since 2018, Paulson, together with former Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner and former Fed Chair Ben Bernanke, have been advocating to gut restrictions placed on Dodd-Frank financial reform legislation of 2010 and restore the ability of federal regulators like the Fed and FDIC to randomly bail out Wall Street hubris. The trio whined in a September 7th, 2018 op-ed in the New York Times that Congress has taken away some of the tools that were crucial to us during the 2008 panic. It's time to bring them back. They also jointly wrote a book that was released in 2019 titled Firefighting: The Financial Crisis and Its Lessons. The book attempted to portray the three as heroic firefighters putting out the flames of the 2008 financial crisis. In reality, the Treasury and the Fed propped up insolvent institutions, and Bernanke oversaw an unprecedented and secret $29 trillion bailout of the corrupt Wall Street banks and their foreign derivative counterparties. Yellen brought millions of dollars in Wall Street baggage to this cabinet-level position. She bears close watching. But she's a Biden appointee, so, how could it be a problem? So anyway, that would be, and just to wrap that part up, that would be how I would try to make to try to draw these connections. That, I mean, we can even add in the dissolution of Chocolate City. Its policy, whether you want to agree with, whether I don't agree with the opinion writer in the Post that so much of it had nothing to do with race. But I agree that it's public policy. It's public policy that determines when Black populations or others are colonially removed, as Dr. Turner has pointed out. That's a policy issue. That's not about, did you start a business? It's policy that determines where there will be Section 8 housing, where there will only be single family homes developed. It's policy. It was policy of Richard Nixon to create the propaganda that still plagues us today, to have us believing that business creation and entrepreneurialism and circulating our dollar can propel us out of this inequality, that somehow this will overturn colonial relations. It was policy that economists like Milton Friedman targeted to create the pathway to exploit people at increasing levels that further the activity of Nixon's decision to separate gold or separate the dollar from the gold standard, and allow for even more speculation that not only led to the 2008 crisis that Yellen and her crew have all, propped up, protected, benefited from, but that also allows for people to not only create but further propagandize us into believing that the most virtual of currencies is the solution. That somehow a more deregulated currency, a more anonymous, a more unregulated, unsurveilled currency is a collective solution to a very communal, to a very collective political problem. Again, these individual solutions being offered for collective problems, and the question of redistribution of the wealth that's created, the question of creating policy that doesn't allow for the accumulation of vast amounts of wealth relative to others. That's not discussed. That's not to be put on the table. But that's all part of the design explicitly stated by Nixon, but I think deployed by many others less explicitly for a very long time. So that's why the only other issue that I wanted to raise, separate from the piece about Black August, although there's a nice little segue story I'll get to in just a second then, but was that the announcement that that the Taliban have walked in and literally just walked in and, well, I guess, like they put it, taking their country back. And I did see some online while, there's a lot of controversy and debate. Apparently on the white liberal left. But I saw this, shout out to the Party for Socialism and Liberation. Their statement here on the US-backed Afghan government surrenders to the Taliban. Long story short, and no disrespect to the great writing here, but my thing was, it was all I kept thinking was that of those T-shirts where they said, this country went to war for 20 years and all I got was this T-shirt, or, this country went to war for 20 years and all that happened was a lot of people died, a lot of people suffered, and things went right back to where they were beforehand. And what I like about what they've done here with the PSL and other folks that are pointing this out, that all of this is not only, again, created by U.S. public policy, foreign policy, but that, my favorite thing that they reminded us of in this story was that the Taliban had offered to give bin Laden over to the United States on the condition that he be tried in a Muslim country or court. I can't remember which, or both maybe. And more importantly, that the U.S. provide evidence that he had done it. And the response was from George Bush, we don't negotiate with terrorists, and they just went on in. So I don't, we don't have to get into the whole thing about the question of evidence. But I thought that, that was a legit thing. You want him? Fine. Show us that he did it. We're not just going to accept that you're saying he did it and then just turn him over. You have to, show us your evidence and we'll give them to you. But they didn't want to do that. So, after, 20 years, and again, unless you are a stockholder in, or an executive in, or an owner of Raytheon or Lockheed Martin or Boeing or Northrop Grumman or, somebody like that, it's like you took a L. Like, this is just one big L. So if you're not one of the handful of private contractors that continue to make millions off of doing what the military used to do, or if you're a manufacturer of weapons and bullets, if you're not one of them, then you probably are looking at this thing as an L. But from their point of view, it's fine. I mean, why not take 20 years to go back to where they started if if in the process you're going to make billions of dollars? I mean, and then I would argue even politically they made more, because politically, in fact, I would argue that a lot of what has been encouraged in terms of what people think about this country and its behavior in the world was on display in that video captured by Status Quo in the anti-vaxxer LA thing. That those obviously underneath that violence were all of these historically encouraged antagonisms around politics and what is the function of the United States and what should it be doing. So I don't think it's look, I don't think it's odd that you hear chants of "Go USA" at professional and international competitive athletic events, and by crowds violently attacking others or defending the most conservative policies on the books in the country. Like even at the most liberal Black Lives Matter rally, you don't hear USA, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, but you sure heard it there. And part of that is buttressed by that this last 20 years of people being propagandized in by both Fox News and MSNBC types. U.S. has to invade. These are Obama's good wars. Remember, he was, a lot of people didn't catch that back in 2008 when he was, he was like, we're going to stop the bad wars. And everybody's like, he's peace. He's going to end war. Now he just means the bad wars, which apparently were none because he didn't stop any and added. He just kept adding wars. So anyway, but also reflected in this is in those same politics and policies are the treatment of people, though there was some good news on this front. Oh, hold up. And shout out to Brett Grody in the Abolitionist Law Center. Oh man, I put the link in the wrong spot. Dang. Hold on a second. All right, let me just find it real quick. Anyway, the point was that Arthur Sedeweo Johnson was released from prison recently. And this is to be credited to the work, as I said, of Brett Grody, who you can find interviewed on this platform a few years ago, back now, but you can see that either just check the channel or I find it at imixwhatilike.org, or I'll put the link I'll add the link to the show notes below, which already includes a lot of links for today's discussions and stuff. But Arthur Sedeweo Johnson, ordered released after 51 years in prison, longtime Pennsylvania prisoner. Sedeweo, age 69, was ordered released today. This is on August 11th, after 5 decades in prison, 30 years of which he spent in solitary confinement. Johnson had been convicted in the 1970 murder of Jerome Wayfield when he was just 18. And it's a crazy, he was represented in court by Brett Grody, the legal director of Abolitionist Law Center, a public interest law firm that has been working to secure his release, saying, "We are grateful to the Conviction Integrity Unit that Mr. Johnson is finally able to return home to his family. When I first met Mr. Johnson, I promised we wouldn't stop fighting until we brought him home. Today, we fulfilled that promise." Johnson was barely 18 when he was convicted of murder on some, scandalous and, spurless evidence that he couldn't even read, because he had a 4th grade education, and he actually didn't learn how to read until he was in prison, trying to, figure his way out. But he was forced to sign, basically tortured, if I'm not mistaken, tortured into signing a confession that, again, he couldn't even read. So, but part of his prolonged imprisonment, of course, was that he became politicized and supportive of the Black liberation movement. This, of course, does not, necessarily work in your favor when trying to get out. So it's really because of people, like Brett and the Abolitionist Law Center that little bit of relative good news exists, and shout out to everybody who was texting me to let me know my audio was bad at the beginning of the show. I'm just now seeing those too. Appreciate you. So definitely, best of luck, and I hope his remaining time is well spent and enjoyed. And then, of course, so many others still need to get out and need our support. Political prisoners, that is. So we will continue to encourage people to do that. So as we await the arrival any moment of Dr. Joy James, what I will do, I've put a link to her work in the show notes below, but I will briefly introduce her before she gets here so that we can maximize the time with her when she is here. I just want to say, and I want to say this to her when she gets here, Dr. James is not only one of my favorite scholars because of her politics and writing, but because of her behind the scenes treatment of other less known, less powerful, less advanced, less prolific, less intelligent, less skillful in their work, but who are attempted to do good work and attempted to make a positive contribution to our struggle from within academia, or I should say, who work within academia and yet still try to make a positive contribution to our struggle. And there isn't, frankly, enough of that happens. Academia is, I think, underestimated and underappreciated in its viciousness, in its encouraged colonial mentality and behavior, and its individualism. From the earliest stages, we are encouraged to almost work individually, which is again why Dr. James Turner had explicitly told us at the last gathering at least that I was at, where many of us were gathered, his acolytes, admirers, I don't know, Turner Cubs, as we've been called, whatever. I don't really care what you say, but he told us we have to do more to work together, among other things. We have to work more collectively. And I know a number of us have my man Joaquin among them. have thought about that ever, not that we hadn't before, but, have taken that sort of call and mandate a little more seriously ever since. So anyway, so Dr. James is, represents so well that tradition, that again, even behind the scenes doing, a lot of things that not a lot of people do, especially when they are as prolific as she is. And specifically, the Ebenezer Fitch Professor of Humanities at Williams College. She has written a tremendous amount, including Shadowboxing, Representations of Black Feminist Politics, Transcending the Talented 10th, Black Leaders and American Intellectuals, Resisting State Violence, Radicalism, Gender, and Race in the U.S. Culture. Her edited books include Warfare in the American Homeland, The New Abolitionists, Neo-Slave Narratives and Contemporary Prison Writings, Imprisoned Intellectuals, States of Confinement, The Black Feminist Reader, and The Angela Davis Reader, and many other pieces, including the one we're going to talk a little bit about today that she wrote in 2018, and that is part of the Great Freedom Archives collection of essays and media commemorating George Jackson, and which also I'm honored to say they've included the Releasing the Dragon George Jackson video mixtape that Bashi Rose and I put together a couple years ago, which I still think is quite fire-ish, if I do say myself. And Dr. James is going to talk to us a little bit about this here that I'll show you, which I had intended to discuss with you all. But if we're going to have her, I mean, duh, as I said at the beginning, duh. From freedomarchives.org, shout out to Claude Marks and that whole crew. George Jackson, 99 books, the 50-year anniversary tribute to George Jackson. We feel inspired, as they say, to elevate the breadth of his intellectual curiosity, the way in which he understood and engaged the world. So they have a number of video pieces, audio pieces, James Baldwin speaking. They have the book list found in his cell when he was assassinated. You can hear him talking on fascism and hear reflections from those who knew and loved him. And here is the full list. David Johnson, who's featured in our video, the late Hugo Purnell, brother Eddie Conway, a lot of dope people here who are involved. Eric, man, that's funny. You know what? That's funny to me. Because you all know that's the mentor of Black Lives Matter. Anyway. Boy, it's a wild world out here. It's wild out here. But in the documents and resources section, you get more stuff. You get Walter Rodney's tribute to George Jackson. You know what I'm saying? Freedom Archives, man. They've been a valuable resource for a long time. Anyway. Just make sure Dr. James is still coming. But then her piece here on which is the one which is what I wanted us to look at and to talk about, and to of course talk about with her, does a number of things that I think are really interesting and important. George Jackson, Dragon, Philosopher, and Revolutionary Abolitionist. Whoops. Inspired by Vietnamese nationalist Ho Chi Minh, who met Harlem Garveyites, Korean nationalists, and Chinese communists, George Jackson found within the California prison yards and cells he was entombed in solitary confinement for 7 of his 10 years of incarceration, mentors for revolutionary struggle. The Vietnamese independence leader and guerrilla fighter who helped to create the Viet Cong, Ho Chi Minh, describes how a prisoner becomes a dragon. George Jackson, referencing South American revolutionary who fought for Cuba, Che Guevara, describes how a Black prisoner can engage in an alchemy that turns a slave into a dragon. Just a little bit bigger. The points that I wanted to get to, though, and I've linked this so you can read the entire thing on your own. But there were two. There was really, well, there's a whole bunch, but there was one section here that I wanted to get to raise with you all and to raise with her, which actually dovetails with this theme I want to keep pushing about political power and even the after party idea. But as James writes here, George Jackson learned to be a revolutionary from other politicized prisoners. He was close to a 20-year-old W.L. Nolan. They were in prison together in 1966 when they co-founded the Black Guerrilla Family as a political entity based on anti-racist class analysis and struggle. Both men had youths marked by crime, violence, and rebellion against prison authority. Both received indeterminate sentences for robberies. When both were moved to Soledad Prison, Nolan initiated a class action lawsuit on human rights violations. In 1969, W.L. Nolan et al. Versus Cletus Fitzharris. Nolan charged prison superintendents Cletus Fitzharris and prison guards with knowingly exacerbating existing social and racial conflicts through direct harassment and in ways not actionable in court, including repressive prison tactics of filing false disciplinary reports and leaving Black inmate cells unlocked for racist Aryan assaults and placing fecal matter or broken glass in the food served to new Africans. Nolan feared for his life as a plaintiff. 4 months after he filed his petition, he and another Black prisoner who had signed it were dead. On the one hand, I would selfishly just want to point out that Nolan what was the other brother's name? Cleveland Edwards. Yeah, Cleveland Edwards. Right. Anyway, my point is that Nolan wasn't killed because he was advocating for Black capitalism, Black entrepreneurialism, Black business, Black banking as a mechanism. He wasn't advocating that prisoners in the prison system develop small businesses that they could use to alleviate the pain of being imprisoned and whatever conflicts would arise from that situation. He was explicitly attempting to use the apparatus, the political power for, apparatus to assume or access political power and have that apparatus address itself to his and his comrades' conditions. He was killed for that. So I will understand how on one level or another, and I've talked about this in a number of other instances, I understand how this could lead to, pun intended, a certain level of pessimism. But the point I'm getting at is that we can't let that turn us away analytically from the reality that political power is the goal. All right, but let me stop there because the author of this piece is here, someone who I've already introduced, who should need no introduction, and who I greatly appreciate jumping in and joining us, Dr. Joy James. Good morning, and thank you. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Good morning. I appreciate you. Sorry, late entry,
No.
but I hope all is well.
No, great. Thank you. Again, I wanted to say while you were here, I said it while you weren't here. I want to thank you again publicly and praise you again publicly for not only your work, but the off the record work you do to support people behind the scenes, I've had a chance to see and even experience some of it. I think it's remarkable. It does not happen enough. I think people don't often recognize, who are not in academia, how treacherous an environment it can be. And I wanted to just publicly thank you again for being the exact opposite and demonstrating what the environment could be like if others were so principled. So I just appreciate that. And for your advice, all kinds of stuff. So I just wanted to thank you publicly for that before we moved on.
Okay,
So
that's kind. And I'll just add, the reason I know how to be helpful at times is because other people have helped me. So that keeps radiating out. But thank you, and all the work you do. So George Jackson.
So where I was attempting to make a point about what you had written here. Going back to what I've been talking about earlier, that in this instance, I was just reading this section from this article that you had written a couple of years ago that is part of the Freedom Archive's package of documents and resources on George Jackson, Dragon, Philosopher, and Revolutionary Abolitionist, that because I think it's interesting that you highlight here what got Nolan and others targeted was their attempt, as I was describing it, to access the political apparatus, which is the basis of power, of real power, to have that apparatus address itself to his and his comrades' conditions. And that's why he was killed. And I was making the specific selfish point that he was not killed because he was promoting within the prison some black capitalist adventure of, let's set up our own businesses and let's support our own entrepreneurialism as a pathway to liberation. He was saying, no, this is a public policy driven situation. We have a public policy that is being abused by these, or maybe established to allow these prison guards to take advantage of our racial and ethnic or class divisions, whatever, and to terrorize us. And I'm going to now address myself to the courts and try to, you all right?
I'm multitasking. I'm trying to get this.
I hear you.
Up, but go ahead. Yeah.
No, it's cool.
I would say.
So anyway, yeah.
To add to that, right? It was also, I talked about this last week with, was it Millennials Are Killing Capitalism?
Right.
And you've been on that program as well, right? So they create an archive, a library. You're creating an archive in the library. George Jackson and W.L. Nolan left an archive in the library. And I think that's part of the 99 books. Literally 99 books, right? That George had in his cell. We're not talking about, in your office or in your, your studio or in your living room, and literally in a cell, like in hostile territory. You curated.
Dr. James, I'm sorry to interrupt, but your camera is shaking so much. I just want to make sure is there a way to stabilize it a little bit? Because I don't want to give anybody and I don't want to cause anybody any problems.
Okay, so is that better?
Yeah, sorry. Thank you very much. Please
so
continue.
Sorry. So 99 books, Lee. So they were librarians, and so was Nolan in a way, right? Because the way I see librarians, it's all about the preservation of knowledge. And the revolutionary librarians are pushing knowledge forward, as you said, not for accumulation, not to build businesses, not to create prestige, power, build a brand, have their name spoken on social media or whatever version of that would have existed 50 years ago. But they're preserving the intellectual gifts of all people who believed in freedom. And that was the 99 books. And so for Nolan, he was contributing to that library by suing the warden, right? And the prison administration. But it was, the notion of freedom is absolutely central here, but also grappling with the reality of terror. Part of it was like, literally in the petition, like, man, you have to write a petition for this. Don't put broken glass and human feces in our food. And it's like, oh my God, we have to go legal for that. You know, it's just like, yeah, you do. And so when he is killed, I mean, that reads to me, you know, and how much can you say in a 2,000-word essay or article, whatever the limit was for that blog piece. And I should also add that Kim Holder, who's former member of the Panthers in Harlem, was instrumental in that. Like there were a lot of discussions, you know. So the notion of Jackson as a dragon philosopher, and an important adjective here, right? That those reflections, ruminations, insights, you know, a lot of that was also cultivated from Holder. And I asked him at the time, do you want to co-author? And he's like, no. So that's another zone of generosity. Here, I'm the archive, the library's in my head. It's free to the public. I don't have to have my name on it. Do what you need to with it. And so Nolan does this legal petition, and that's what we're taught, especially Black people. Like first, like the law says we're commodities and we can be trafficked, human trafficked, sex trafficked, you know, on and on. Then it's like, okay, now you're emancipated, which is not technically free, but you know, as Du Bois says, if 200,000 of us fought in the war, you know, we're gonna get something out of it. Okay, so now you're emancipated, like after the Civil War. But then the regimes of terror keep reproducing that, you know, underscore that you're not free. But we can also do something like put glass and fecal matter in your food and get paid by taxpayers while we're doing that. Like we're doing that on the clock. It's not like we, you know, sneak back in the prison after we checked out as a guard. It's like, no, this is part of my 9-to-5 shift. And so when Nolan writes and petitions, and he goes to the head, it's like, let's go to the CEO. Let's hold them accountable, right? That becomes his death sentence. And excuse me, I'm not an authority on George Jackson. I'm not a historian. And other people have written the books, and other people have known him, and other people are, you know, archiving, curating his work. Freedom archives 99 books. But in Black August, we can remember that the generosity and the risk taken of Nolan, who also I believe was a mentor of George, is what created the dragon philosopher. I mean, we learn how to think and struggle, and we continue to think for those of us, the collective us who are caged and tortured and have to pick literally, you know, SHIT out of their food or throw it in the garbage, or rat poison in the case of other prisons like on the East Coast. This becomes our intellectual gift. It becomes our intellectual trial. And so, yeah, the architects of abolitionism, because I talk about George in that context too, the architects would include W.L. Nolan. So, I mean, the way I would wrap this is to say, maybe we do our best thinking in honor of the people we loved and who mentored us and who were taken from us. Maybe that forces us to think in very painful ways, which not happy outcomes, you know, but it forces us to grapple with reality in the grit of it and also in its terror.
There's a number of things obviously that you say here that I think are fascinating, but one among them you say, and there's a number of references here that you make that are really interesting. You say here, saving not the man, but the meanings of revolutionary struggle suggests that George Jackson requires more analysis because of his proximity to a violence that has continued to grow in his absence. If prison and fascism are extensions of democracy's rootedness in racial capital, then what is the meaning of his claim in the uncensored Blood in My Eye, quote, I can only be executed once, no matter what I do will always explain me away, so I rage on, aggressive and free, end quote. For Jackson, dragon philosophers die first in body and later in reputation. Weeks after he was killed, Angela Davis from her prison cell wrote Reflections on the Black woman's role in the community of slaves, published in the Black Scholar in December of 1971, paying homage to slave insurrection and the feminization of her beloved. saying, quote, "I would like to dedicate these reflections to one of the most admirable Black leaders to emerge from the ranks of our liberation movement, George Jackson, whom I loved and respected in every way. As I came to know and love him, I saw him developing an acute sensitivity for the real problems facing Black women, and thus refining his ability to distinguish these from their mythical transpositions," end quote. There's just in those two, well, one section, you say so many interesting things that I would love to I don't know, hear more. I mean, one, you describe you mentioned an uncensored blood in my eye. So
Yeah.
I honestly don't. So is the copy I've been reading all these years the censored version? How do you know?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I was comparing it to Soledad Brother, because Soledad Brother was heavily. Yeah, no. Oh, now you're telling me to be a better writer. Okay,
no,
I'll work on it.
I'm telling me to be a better reader. I'm just slow. I just read it as, wait a minute, am I missing something?
Yeah, anyway, you're like, oh my God, is there an underground blood in my eye? Right. It's like, oh my, where do I get that edition? They burned it.
I would say. No, what you mean relative to Soledad Brother? I got you. My fault. Right.
But think of the juxtaposition. Yeah. Okay. So there's a lot of juxtapositions going on, right? Because George was deep, right? And it wasn't just deep. It was like, if you want to build a terror zone, dome, whatever, around the captives, then you understand that they're political prisoners, even if their choices don't always seem. I think sometimes we romanticize political prisoners, right? Like we romanticize warriors, like we want the pristine, we want the pretty. We want something that will allow you to cross over, into civil society and then be respectable at some point. I'm not sure that's how it works. I would not know. So I'm speculating because never have been, revolutionary. So hopefully we'll never be a political prisoner unless, we go full-blown fascist and then they just get you when you're shopping. But the thing with the juxtapositions with George, right? Like Soledad Brother was edited by Faye Stender, who is a white attorney, a Jewish woman who was always a rebel in her own right. Started off as Huey P. Newton's attorney after he shot, I believe, or allegedly shot. I can't remember all these cases now, but I think it was the police officer, John Frey, or Fry, F-R-E-Y. So it's rare that you see women operating in these zones. Although when you get to Angela's case, like half of the legal team, I think there's 6, 3 of them are going to be women attorneys, right? Including Margaret Burnham, the daughter of Dorothy Burnham, CPUSA leaders, ethical fighters for freedom. So Blood in My Eye is published after he's dead. There's no reason to protect him because they already took him in body and spirit. He remains with us, right? And the interesting thing for me, if I recall correctly, is Toni Morrison put that book out from Random House. And so I did write about that in the Boston Review, like when the documentary on Toni Morrison came out and it was all flowery. And I was like, yeah, there's another side of Toni Morrison here that I'm not seeing. Because you're talking about the fiction, which is, Song of Solomon, Magnificent. I could go down the list, right? But I'm like, wait, Morrison was the editor for 3 Black radicals. And in there were revolutionaries, right? Which I'm definitely calling George probably maybe the only revolutionary in the group, who were incarcerated for their links to combat that led to the deaths of prison guards or police. Like, rarely would anybody do that today and call that an academic career in a major house publishing site, right? But Morrison pulled it off. So Huey P. Newton, George Jackson, and then later Angela Davis. So when you get to Angela's autobiography, it's very disciplined. And I would say it's very clean. Like, they don't have to tell you everything. They're not going to tell you everything. But what they tell you is compatible in some ways with the reform of the social order. When you get to Blood in My Eye, I haven't read it in a while and I had to stop teaching it. I'm sorry, but the places I teach, I had to stop teaching it, right? It's just like, okay, I stopped. But y'all may want to go check this out in your free time, right? But when you get to Blood in My Eye, it's a guerrilla manual. And so and sometimes I've heard from people, I think that were in the party, at least the people I know, it's not representative of the party rights narrative. Sometimes I hear Jonathan in it, right? But and so I'm just gonna go for it. We talk to the dead on a regular basis because we're killed on a regular basis. And I'm not just talking about physically, biologically, I mean, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, we're traumatized. We're like, lynchings are always collective. They radiate out as such, right? You didn't need to know George Floyd to feel it, right? So when Blood in My Eye comes out, it just, for me, it's the coda. It's like, this is war. I always said it was war from the site that I occupy, which is where, as W.L. Nolan knows, they put stuff in your food, and then they shoot you when you just try to bring a petition to court, which is our only option, is to go to court. Literally, that's the only option we have under democracy, is we sue you. But you're saying, well, if you sue us, we'll shoot you. Then you're like, what am I supposed to do with that? And so I guess George's answer was Blood in My Eye. So it's an amazing text. Even Soledad Brother, because you see in Soledad Brother, the intimacy of family and the contradictions. I said this before on, the other interview I did a week or two ago, like, stop ragging on the mother, right? Just like, we just do our best. And we also, yes, there's a conservative element. We would like to see you grow up to old age. And so if that means we're going to make you like go to these, I think he had to go to Catholic schools. I mean, the little prison regimes, that are in the miniature, we figure, we do the calculation, it's not the same as going to Rikers. So we're going to, do what we can to make you, quote, obey and conform. But it doesn't always work. And even when we're doing it, we know it's not completely ethical, right? Because it's not a freedom school, it's a captive school. So George, eventually understands that his mother, I believe her name, Georgia Jackson, right, his namesake, is his ally and his fierce defender. So he becomes militant while he's incarcerated and tortured. She becomes militant because she's the mother of an incarcerated, tortured soul. And then, of course, she murdered both her boys. So then, she's in another zone. George, I believe, was in that zone before he physically was forced to transition. Now, here's the question for me, like in our last minutes, right? The jailhouse lawyer sent out a communique about it may have started already. I mean, the phone was shaking because I was trying to type to access my laptop to try to get that information. But please look up the pending organizing strike, whatever they call it, that is going down, and figure out what our relationship is going to be to that and how we're going to help. Because even though I believe some 8,000 people came to George's funeral, and that's important to remember, it would be really interesting what would happen if 8,000 people showed up while he was alive, or W.L. Nolan. And I don't know. I can't answer. I mean, do we all get mowed down? Do we all get like tear gas? I don't know. But for me, if I'm going to take anything out of Black August right now, it's been too much killing. I'm not going to assign your book and not rage while I'm reading it again, or not assign your book and rage because I feel I can't assign it because what, you're going to go tell the dean I'm teaching this book or something? I don't know. I'm old enough. I've been through all this, the stages of like BS in the academy. It's like, whatever, I'm still employable. But that's not my issue, not my primary. My primary issue is, what is my relationship to the incarcerated rebel? Right? Whether it's Stevie Wilson, who's in the same prison, I believe, in Pennsylvania, that Russell Maroon Schultz is in and Mumia is in. Whether it's Sundiata Acoli, whether it's Mutulu Shakur, whether it's Leonard Peltier, whether it's Joe Pat, I could go on like for the rest of our time. And I'm not dismissing any people that I did not name, right? We have to materialize those relationships, and having goodwill and secondary, tertiary trauma is not sufficient. It never was. You can't keep everybody alive. We're not gonna. I mean, We're all mortal. We're going. But it's under which conditions you transition. The state does not get to rape us, rob us, torture us, make us, in the food. I mean, forget that. So, again, I've been asking constantly because I don't know what the plan is. And I guess it's a collective one, but let me know what the plan is. So however you started by saying, how I privately support people in their academic careers and publishing careers. Okay. But what I really want to do, I want to support the freedom fighters. And am I brave enough to do it like full throttle? Probably not if I kept my job this long, right? But I can do something, and I think it's incumbent on all of us as these new actions take place. And I hear from the Abolish Slavery National Network that they know people, activists inside, who say that they're on a hit list, which I've said before, a hit list is an assassination list. So dragon philosophers, I wrote in that essay, are inevitable. Why? Because the people you don't break mutate into something else. And they're not fully human based on the civic code of civility, conformity, and clone. What they are is something that's transitional, transcendent. I don't know how many TRA words I could throw out. They're different. I'm not them, but I recognize that they shine. Are they scary? Yeah. Anything that threatens the order probably scares everybody, because as much as we may dislike, disdain, or have contempt for the order, it is order. What does it mean when you lose order? Like, we don't want the cops to be in control, or the billionaires, or these other predators, but what does it mean to lose structure? And the dragon philosophers, they probably think outside of all bonds and all boundaries. So when Angela dedicates that article, which, rightly so, Davis gets to, I should say Professor Davis, because I use the titles. Professor Davis will define their work any way they choose to. It's their work. And so now it's like they did not know at the time, but it was really a feminist manifesto. I don't have a problem with that, but I just want to know, what was it at the time? It was 3 weeks after George was murdered? In the moment that you write, that is the moment of ultra reality, because that's where your emotional intelligence is raising the bar to the next level, because everything's on fire. You're not just doing logic, you're feeling your pain as it appears in print, and it is a form of philosophy as well. So the role of the Black woman in the community of slaves, right? I don't know if I got the title correct. It does have, I've been talking about the captive maternal till like my mouth goes dry, but these early stages of compromise, whatever, probably shot through after you talk about Moynihan, dishonor, et cetera, et cetera. But then it's like, okay, this is what we actually did, right? We brought messages, we went underground, we were combatants, we poisoned the well. Okay, if I said anything that was illegal, it's historical, so you can't hold it on me, right? But we did everything we needed to become dragons in a slave encampment. Like, how do you break free? The dragon takes you out. Does it have to be militarist? I don't think so. It could be pacifist. But my understanding of the state, it doesn't really care. They will still take you out. I mean, Martin Luther King, how pacifist can you get beyond that? But he was like, at the end, he was a dragon. He was disciplined by certain Christian tenets of love and forgiveness and redemption. He was still a dragon, anti-imperialist, anti-racist. Malcolm, dragon. Religion changes, right? But the philosopher grows. No longer in the Nation of Islam, different kind of, Muslim faith, more internationalist, more dragon. I mean, dragons are scary, they're fiery, this is the lore. Like, you read those children's books, like, I don't know who Puff the Magic Dragon was, right? I never got into him. But the dragon,
well, that was a weed allegory anyway, so that wasn't.
Was it? Oh, thank you. Yeah, because I've never really done weed, so I missed that. I missed out on that. Actually, that would have been taking me to the next level. So thank you for edifying and educating me. So, okay, so we'll give Puff the pass because he was like, you know, he was high. But
that's right. Puff
that's
give.
right.
So yeah.
But I mean, I don't want to like eat up all the time, but I want to go back to
No, take all the time you need.
Okay, the people who are struggling. You know, what does it mean to be high on freedom when you're a captive? Literally, when somebody tells you when to wake up, when to go to bed, when to go to the bathroom, when to shower, when to put your fork down, when to pick it up. I don't know, but somehow they keep appearing. So they're rare. W.L. Nolan was a dragon. And again, he was using the pen. You know, the cliche would be not the sword, whatever. But he still got killed. So I think for me, I can't speak for anybody else. I have to deal with my grief and trauma so that I can figure out how to be more useful. And then I need to understand with the community how we protect ourselves so that our usefulness can have some longevity. But every time I see a dragon, even if I cross the street to get a better look, I say I'm crossing to get a better, like, no, man, the heat's too intense. I'm crossing the street. But I will slightly bow because I'm acknowledging a transformation into a stage of struggle that I have not achieved, but I can recognize as real and as indispensable. So again, if what you first wrote was dedicated to somebody who was a dragon, then it doesn't matter how you interpret it later, because the dragon trail will always be embedded in that work because you were talking to the dragon when you wrote it.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to. Yeah, I'm gonna have to sit with that for a while. The other part from that section that I just wanted to raise up was that we had a conversation with Sundiata Chajua a couple weeks ago about among other things, the history of the Black Scholar Journal. And so I just thought it was interesting to again read, you know, how it was the location for such a powerful or important in the moment reflection. But anyway,
yeah, I don't know, because honestly, just like full disclosure about how I live my life as an academic, I know it's an academic peer-reviewed journal now, and I know that's, you know, an advancement within, you know, the ranks of academic literature and recognition, and it's fine, right? And I think aren't you an editor?
I am on the
editorial?
I'm on the editorial you know, staff. Yeah.
So for Imprisoned Intellectuals, which, you know, the PDF you can find online, the cover is George in chains with just that wry grin. It doesn't matter, he's shackled. Like, yeah, he's like, I'm free and I'm in chains, deal with the contradiction, right? They gave me the image. They allowed me to have, I believe it was either them or Freedom Archives, or they allowed me to reprint material in that anthology. And so in some ways, they're a bedrock of the library that I keep talking about and the archive. That, you know, if they're forming in the late 1960s, early 1970s, that's like half a century. And they're documenting the militancy as it's unfolding in real time. And again, however it gets interpreted later as just academic data, you know, for accumulation of more publications or instructing your students, which is all important, like, you know, write, teach. I mean, that's what we do. It's still, at the time, I believe that they were writing about and writing to the rebels and the freedom fighters. And so if you're looking and listening, reading carefully, you will find the origins, like what I said about the Black woman in the community of states. You can interpret this material 50 years from now, 100 years from now, whatever. But if you closely scrutinize it and you listen to what it's saying, you understand to some degree, you rematerialize the freedom fighter. I really believe that origin stories are absolutely essential. Like, why did you write this in the first place? Why did you protest in the first place? Why did you go under it? Like, the origin stories are always rebirthing stories. that someone will find some trace of the origin story and understand how the birth of freedom continuously reoccurs. This is their legacy to us. And it's scattered because it's like broken apart, but it still exists. And again, Soledad Brother can't be definitive because it was heavily edited without George's permission. And I'm not sure that Blood in My Eye can be definitive either, because it was just like, the 17-year-old has, got shot up in the van, which was totally unnecessary. I was saying that it's a performative violence. Like, let us show you what a 20th century lynching looks like. And then now it's like, let us show you what a 21st century lynching looks like. And I'm like, okay, let us show you what Ida B. Wells and other people taught us. This is what resistance to lynching as the norm looks like. And we understand, like, people lose their jobs, or they lose promotion, they lose pay, and that is painful. But the most painful zones, we already know, are in the prisons and the jails. I mean, Rikers, people keep dying on a regular basis. So, I know we only have a few minutes. I would say sometimes I can be very critical of what I think of as abstract abolitionism. But I also know it's built on the ground of something. And part of that groundedness is on the spine of George Jackson. It's like the book spine, the physical spine, the coffin spine. It's like whatever. We build everything, right, upon the foundations that our slain leaders leave us. And I would like to say the living ones, but they tend not to live that long. And this is why, I mean, like, even when I'm pissed and depressed, which is probably like every other whatever, we have like one of the richest inheritances, right? Like, people loved us so much, and we weren't even born then, some of y'all. I think, I was there. I was, like, not old enough to do anything, or maybe I wouldn't have done it anyway. But we've inherited everything we need. And we build on that, everything we're due. And so I don't think it has to be that complicated, except for the state has just told us, like, on penalty of, and fill in the blank for W.L. Nolan, for George and others, Jonathan, it was on penalty of death. But we have to decide what kind of lives we want to lead, supporting the rebels who are most tortured in these zones, in these enclosures, right? And then in the concentric circles we form around them, we can express our revolutionary love in ways that it helps us manage our fear and our anxiety, so that we're more productive in struggle.
I can't think of a better way to end. Dr. James, I want to thank you again very much for joining us this morning. We will continue to, Jared Ware had jumped on with us the other morning to help us get straight on the jailhouse lawyers strike. We'll continue to support that. Thanks for that. And we'll continue to support and promote the 99 Books commemorative project of the Freedom Archives, where they can find the piece of yours that we were just reading from, and many others. There's so much more. I can't wait to talk to you again. I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you again, and for all your continued work. Appreciate you very much.
Stay well. Thanks.
All right. You too. Take care. All right, everybody. Thanks again. Big thanks again to Dr. James for coming through. Thanks to all of you as well. One day I have to really talk to her about, years ago, I found a book, a collection of essays that had one of hers in it. And she had written on Panama, and like halfway through it, the pages had been ripped out. So it was like, it was weird. So I never found it again, never finished the essay. So anyway, but definitely thanks to Dr. James. Thanks, of course, to all the work that Jailhouse Lawyers do, that the Abolitionist Law Center is doing, Freedom Archives, Prison Radio, Jericho Movement, Definitely shout out to all of them, and we have to continue to be about the support of political prisoners and that work. Again, thanks to everybody for coming out this morning. Please do like, share, subscribe, join, and continue. If you've seen this live or watching this later, make sure if you want to be heard, we welcome you to
put it in the comments.
And we'll catch you next time. Remix Morning Show tomorrow morning. A lot of other great content at Black Power Media. So please do check it all out. And we'll catch you next time here at I Mix What I Like tomorrow morning on the Remix. Black Power Media all day, every day, 7 days a week, filled with content. I have to go back and watch Sundays from last night. I hate that I missed it. But anyway, catch you in that whirlwind. And as Fred used to say, peace, because I know you're willing to fight for it. So take care, everybody. Catch you next time. Thanks again. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. What I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.